And the title of this part, or the second part of Why Choose God, is Does Science Disprove God? Does science disprove God? Now, this is something that we hear a lot. Okay, a lot of people say this. Oh, well, science disproves God. And science is lifted up as a almost like the ultimate truth out there, right? So last time we talked about, does truth exist? All right. And now today we're going to do, does science disprove God? Now, if you want to hear, does truth exist, you can go to our YouTube channel and look that up again and kind of review that. But today we're going to talk about, does science disprove God? All right, so, and I don't know if this is going to work here. Let's see here. Aha, all right. So, if you were to look at the world religions today, all right, they're represented by this picture here, all right, these three. The first one, you have a hand holding the world, all right, and this one is the theistic view, or God made all view, all right? And this encompasses three major religions. That's Christianity, the Jewish religion, and of course, Islam. All right? The one with a hand in the earth is pantheism. In other words, God is in all things. God is in this speaker stand. God is in this computer. God is in that microphone. God is in this church. God is in the tree. God is in the rock. God is in you. God is in me. So that's pantheism. All right? And that's covered by Zen Buddhism. Now, the most famous representation of Zen Buddhism is Star Wars. Have you seen Star Wars? Luke, use the Force. The Force is within you, right? That's pantheism, right? Hinduism, New Age, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. That's all represented by that. And then the third view is, the one with no hand, is there's no God at all, right? That's atheism, or atheistic view. So you can sum up every major religion into these major foundational ideas. Okay, so now have you ever heard this from someone or from your kids? All right, and they'll say this: I don't believe in God. Or sometimes they'll say, Mom and Dad, they go off to college, they'll come back from college, and they say, I don't believe in God. Now, do you think this is a typical statement or atypical statement by Christian children, actually? How many think it's typical? Okay, how many think it's atypical? Okay, atypical? Okay. Well, in fact, if you look at the statistics, this happens in 75% of Christian children who go to college. Okay, so 75%, that's the statistics, right? So, why is this true? Well, many times, it includes many things. First of all, sometimes kids just want to have fun, okay? They just want to live without God, all right? They want to be accepted, right? There's many reasons why kids would tell us things. But one of the main things, that the reason why this is true, is first, that they don't know why Christianity is true. So do you know why Christianity is true? Do you know why? And then number two, secondly, they run into atheistic professors. And there's one particular atheistic professor, Stephen Weinberg, but this is all across the board. If you go to any one of our major universities, and this is what you'll hear from the professor. So this is Stephen Weinberg. He is a Nobel laureate, very smart guy, professor in physics at UT Austin. And this is what he says, all right? I personally feel that the teaching of modern science is corrosive of all religious belief, and I'm all for that. If scientists can destroy the influence of religion on young people, then I think it may be the most important contribution that we can make. So what is the stated goal of professors in our universities today? Destroy the influence of religion, right? That is the stated goal, to destroy the influence of God. In fact, notice this. In our universities, it's not to find truth, right? Isn't that why you go to the university, right? You're like, yeah, I want to go to college. Why? Because I want to find truth. I want to know things, right? I want to learn things, right? It's not to teach truth, but rather to do what? Destroy religion. That's the stated goal of our universities. And you'll see this across the board, and I'll show this to you later. But in other words, they want to try to disprove religion and try to remove religion from our young people, from our conscious thought, from society, right? So, atheistic professors believe that reason, science, evolution, morality, and evil point to atheism and away from God, all right? And by the way, you guys didn't know you were coming to a university class today, didn't you? I'm doing more teaching today, okay? All right, so this is a belief system, okay? Did you notice that? It's not about science. It's not about anything else. It is a belief system, or you can even say it's a faith system, okay? It is a faith system, all right? So now, why are we talking about this, and what does Paul say, or what does the Bible say? Well, did Paul have to deal with this? Yes, he did. In fact, when he was in Athens, and when he was in Corinth, and when he was in the Greek in Macedonia, he had to deal with this. In fact, there was a group of people called Epicureans, and they believed that God did not create the earth. What does that sound like? Atheism, right? He had to deal with atheism. He had to deal with all the things that we deal with today. There's LGBTQ, there's the right-wing movement. There's all these movements out there that we see today. We think, oh, wow, this is new, this is weird. Actually, no. In Greek, in Macedonia, in the Roman Empire, during that time, Paul had to deal with each one of these. If you look at his books, he deals with all of these subjects, and it's really interesting. But we don't know this because we don't read our Bibles, and so we need to read our Bibles. But 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3 to 5, and I like this version, the way it says this. I studied this in the Greek, but it says this: "For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh." All right? So we are not waging war we're not going around with guns as Christians and killing people, right? Right? We're not doing that, right? What are we waging? "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh," guns, knives, these kind of things, "but have divine power to destroy strongholds." Right? So where do our weapons come from? It comes from divine or from God, right? Now going on, we destroy arguments. I like the way the King James Version says it. It says imaginations. In other words, I think the translators had some sense of humor, because what they were saying is that any argument against God is an imagination. It's an imagination. It's made up, right? Okay, so we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion what? Opinion from PhDs, from those who say that they are learned and smart. Lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ, right? So what does Paul admonish us to do? So in other words, he calls these people what? False teachers, right? So what are we supposed to do? We are supposed to not only give evidence as to why Christianity is true, but also to show why the unbelievers' arguments are false. And we are to destroy these arguments against Christianity. Right? So that is our mission, especially in the secular world. Do you know, I believe the reason why Paul's books are some of the major writings in the Bible is because God knew that in our time, just before he was to come, those same philosophies were to rise up. And if you read Paul's writings, he has an answer for every single thing that is going on in this world today. It is interesting. It is very interesting. All right, so the question is then, are these arguments reason, science, causality, information, which is, you can say, evolution, morality, evil, are they arguments for atheism, or are they arguments for God? Well, I'm going to submit to you today that they are arguments for God. Now, we don't have time to go through all this. We're just going to go through one of them, and that's science, all right? Science, all right? So, to answer this question, we have to go through three questions. We have to answer three questions. Number one, what does science say about God? Number two, can science disprove God? Number three, does science need God? Okay? So these are the three things that we have to talk about. All right? So number one, what does science say about God? Well, first of all, I must ask the question, what does science say? Anyone ever think about this? What does science say? What does science tell us, right? And first of all, what is science? Right? What is science? So science, since it's put up on this pedestal, we have to talk about this. It is the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and testing of theories against the evidence obtained, right? So, in other words, what is science? It is literally just, right? It is literally a way to gather data. That's all science is, right? Science is a way to gather data. So, let me ask you this. So, does science say anything? Well, let's look at a very famous trial. I want to illustrate this for you by looking at this very famous trial. Who is this? Those of you who are older know who this is. Those of you who are younger don't know who this is, right? Who is this? O.J. Simpson, right? Now, we're not going to say he's, guilty or innocent, okay? That's not for us. We're not retrying this, okay? But we're going to try to answer the question, does science tell us something, all right? So we're going to go back to 1995, all right? 1995. All right, here we go. Okay, back to 1995. All right, so what does science say? So this is some of the science that was seen at the O.J. Simpson trial. First of all, Simpson's blood, okay, was found at the scene of the crime, right? So there is a 1 in 170 million chance that it is not his blood. Okay, this is what the science tells us. Number 2, Goldman, Brown, and Simpson's blood was found in Simpson's Ford Bronco. Okay, number 3, the glove at the scene had blood from all three and matched the glove at Simpson's house. Okay? And then number 4, bloody footprints were found from a rare brand of size 12 shoe that Simpson owned. Now, there's only 199 of these pairs sold in the United States, and Simpson owned one of them. Okay? And then, of course, Nicole Brown Simpson's blood was found on Simpson's socks. And when they analyzed it, when they analyzed the blood genetically, they found that there was a 1 in 21 billion chance that it was not her blood. Okay, so very uniquely, this blood, what it means is that probably she is the only human being in the entire world to have this blood, right? So all of us are the same. All of us have a blood. Genetically, if we were to analyze our blood, there's a 1 in 21 billion chance that someone has our exact blood, okay, genetically. All right? So, let me ask you this. Does science show that Simpson was guilty? Now, how many of you say yes? Yeah. Come on, don't be scared. Come on. How many of you say no? I say no. Wow, you guys are hard. Wow. Yes. Yes. Okay, I got a few more hands. Yeah, okay, no. Wow, man. Okay, so the answer is no. Now, why? Because science doesn't interpret itself. Okay? When you look at the blood type in a genetic machine, it doesn't say Simpson did it. Okay? If I take a microscope, I look at the blood on the glove, it doesn't say Simpson is guilty. Right? So science doesn't say anything, but what does? Scientists do. All right? So scientists say something about the data. The data is the data. Okay? Now I'm going to illustrate this further. In 2004, an NBC poll of 1,186 people asked the question, do you think that O.J. Simpson is guilty? Now, 77% said that he was guilty, okay? But if you do the ethnic breakdown, notice what this says. 87% of white people said he was guilty, and 29% of African Americans said that he was guilty. So why such a big, huge disparity? They had the same evidence, they had the same data, but why such a huge disparity? Right? It was because of what? Two different worldviews. Right? A white person may not have experienced any racism, okay, may not have experienced any of these kind of negative effects from society, and so they are more apt to say, well, yes, based on the evidence, it looks guilty. But an African American might have themselves experienced racism, might have themselves experienced, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, yeah, prejudice is the word I'm looking for. And so they would have a different worldview. In fact, they would say, all these things, they're doing this to frame OJ because he's black. Right? So does science say anything? No, science says nothing. What you get from science is just pure data. How you interpret that scientific data is what? Something on your own, right? It's because of your world view, all right? This is the same. In fact, when you look at the science field, or field of science, you see this same thing, all right? And do you think that creationists, creation scientists, and atheist scientists, did you know that there's creation scientists? Study this, right? There's scientists who believe in creationism, and there's scientists who believe in atheists. Now, do you think they're fighting over the data? No, they're not fighting over data, right? They're fighting over the interpretation of the data, right? They'll look at, for example, the fossil record, and they'll say, look, this is because of a material cause, natural cause, right? Creationists will look at the fossil record and say, no, this is evidence of the flood, right? Look here. And so what are they doing? They're fighting against each other about this. So let me ask you this then. Can science disprove God? Right? So the first thing we found out was, does science say anything about God? No, it doesn't. It doesn't say a thing. Number two, can science disprove God? All right? So you'll hear this a lot in our society today. They'll say, science disproves God. Right? Science disproves God. A very famous professor at Oxford, his name is Dr. John Lennox. He is a mathematician. And what's funny is he's a Christian, actually, at Oxford University. Very, very highly regarded. I think he has multiple Nobel Prizes and Nobel laureates and all this stuff. But he is at Oxford University, and he asks his student this every year. He asks his students this, who are in his class. All right? He says this. All right, suppose you have a Ford Model T in front of you, and he asks this question. What accounts for the Model T? I'll give you two possibilities. Henry Ford or the laws of internal combustion. Right? Now these students are going to Oxford. It's like our Harvard or Princeton. Okay, these students say, well, Dr. Lennox, it's obvious you need both, right? You need Henry Ford to create the car, and you need the laws of internal combustion to make the car work. And then he'll say, aha! Now, why can't atheists see this point? You see, you can study the Model T from now till kingdom come, right? But you will never disprove Henry Ford. Okay? Right? You will never disprove that Henry Ford is there, right? In other words, right, if a person, if a scientist looks at Henry Ford's engine and continues to look at it and look at it and look at it, he may find that, oh, hey, you know what? Things appear to be designed here. Things appear to be made. And as he studies it more, it points to what? A creator, right? Someone who made it, right? And so it's like this. When an atheist points to the world and says, we don't see God out there. This is like looking at the engine of the Model T and saying, I don't see Henry Ford in there. All right? Of course, he is not part of the car, right? He created the car. Same thing. God isn't the universe. He did what? He created the universe. To say that a scientist can disprove the existence of God is like saying that a mechanic can disprove the existence of Henry Ford. Right? The mechanic, and this is from John Lennox, the mechanic cannot disprove the existence of Henry Ford. Right? The mechanic can know all about the car, but he can never disprove that Henry Ford does not exist. Today, we can look at all the scientific data, but no one can disprove that God does not exist. And you know what? I hear this all the time from people. Well, if you give science enough time. First of all, that's a faith statement. And secondly, you know what we found? Is that the more science develops things, the more science looks deeper, the more they see design. The more they see it points to a creator. I'm glad that they developed the electron microscope. You know what they found? That the cells are machinery, intricate machinery that is irreducible complex. Do you know what irreducible complex means? That means that if there was one part missing out of that cell, it would not work. All the parts had to be there together at one time for that cell to work. In fact, in 2006, they did a genetic study of all the animals, including humans, on this earth. And you know what they found out? No one says this is tucked away in a little journal somewhere. And it was done by an atheist group of scientists. They studied all the genetics, and they found that the animals, the birds, man, everybody, including they did dinosaurs as well. They checked there. And you know what they said? All those, according to genetic evidence, appeared at the same time. What? But no one's talking about it. Because why? It's not sensationalist, number one. Number two, it doesn't support evolution. All right? So, let's look at the two types of science. All right? So, first type of science is empirical science. All right? This is a science, right? It's kind of like the airplane mechanic. You have an object in front of you. You have an airplane. This is a Cessna G700, very expensive plane. Beautiful plane, very, very meticulously engineered, right? So the airplane mechanic, he comes by, he looks at the plane. He knows, first of all, how it operates, right? Secondly, he knows how to fix it or modify it, right? But what does he not know? He doesn't know why the airplane came into existence. He doesn't know why each part was made the way it was, right? He can study it and he might kind of deduce that. But he doesn't know exactly. He doesn't understand the origin. He just knows that this beautiful plane exists. All right? And he studies the present, right? This is what empirical science do. They say present. He discovers how things operate. Same thing for us today. Who gave us our cell phones? Right? We have more power in our hand than NASA did in 1960s. Okay? That is the power of empirical science. They figured out how to make transistors. They figured out how to do all these things. But was that something, does that deal with origin? No, it was something that is intrinsic in atoms and molecules and things like that, right? They figured out how this works, they figured out how to manipulate it, and boom, we get an iPhone. Okay? So, the other type of scientist is the airplane inspector. This is the forensic scientist. So let's say an airplane crashes. Let's say this plane crashes, right? This is a forensic scientist, okay, or origin science. You can also say origin science as well, right? Now, based on the evidence in front of them, based on the data in front of them, the origin scientist has to make a conclusion, right? Based on that, right? So forensic or origin science studies how things originated or came to be, right? So for example, in our example with O.J. Simpson, right? A forensic scientist went through, there's 2 dead bodies, okay? There's a person with blood on their body, and they have to say, okay, how did this situation originate? Right? Let's look at the data. So that is the forensic scientist or the origin scientist. Now notice, they're completely different, right? There is more security in what? Empirical science than in origin science, right? Origin science, depending on your worldview, we just found out that, you can interpret the data in the way you want to, right? And then, of course, the airplane manufacturer is the creator or the designer. And this is the position where God sits, all right? So, for example, in empirical science, if you take 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part water in a lab, you mix them together, what do you get? Water. You can do this over and over and over and over and over again. It doesn't matter where you do it, you can do it, right? But, so it's repeatable, right? But forensic science isn't repeatable, right? You can't go back, resurrect someone who has been murdered, right? And witness the murders again. You can't do that, right? It is a one-time what? Historical event. It's a one-time historical event. So you have to look at the clues, you have to become a detective, and then you have to infer the best answer on the scientific data, right? So when an atheist comes out and says that science has disproved God, or that there is no God, what they're doing is that they're using the prestige of empirical science, right? Look at what it's given us, GPS, right? How many of you use GPS, right? You can't go anywhere these days without using GPS. I think we lost a part of ourselves in that matter, right? You know, and so I try not to use a GPS once in a while just to test myself. But anyway, you have medical advancements, right? For me to do my job in the medical clinic, right, I rely on these medical advancements that have occurred so that I can do my job, right? All right, and then, so these are the advancements, or this is the prestige of empirical science. But what happens is, to the atheists, is that they impose empirical science onto forensic science or origin science, and they say, see, science disproves God. But my friends, empirical science says nothing about where the universe came from, our purpose in life, why we are here. These are all historical questions. If science did that, do you think our kids coming out of college would still say, oh, I'm trying to find myself. I'm still trying to find my purpose in life. If science answered that question for them, do you think they would be saying that to you? No, they wouldn't be saying that to you, right? We say it in high school too. I'm trying to find myself. Where am I? What am I doing? What's my purpose in life? So science does not say anything. Scientists do. So last part, and we're going to close with this. Does science disprove God? Or sorry, does science need God? Does science need God? So that's an odd question, right? So Paul Davies, physicist, Arizona State University. He is also one of the top Nobel laureate physicists. He wrote an article in the New York Times, and it was titled this, and he got a lot of flack for this, Taking Science on Faith. Why are there orderly natural laws? Okay, scientists take the orderly natural laws, he says, of physics on faith. Okay, and that those laws are all expressed as tidy mathematical relationships. All right. Now, have you ever wondered why that our world is so well described by mathematics? Which is, by the way, empirical science. Have you ever wondered why? Right? If I have one phone here and I have another phone here, 1 plus 1 equals 2. Right? Mathematics describes our world, right? So well, right? You don't have one phone and another phone and that equal 4 or 8 or 16, right? It's something that kids do, right? Oh yeah, I have one toy and I have another toy. And then Kalea gets mad and says, sis, you have 2 toys and I only have none. Right? Mathematics describes our world. Now, why mathematics, which is a rational and orderly way to describe the world around us, right? Why is it so well described? Why is it so rational? Because what? There is a rational mind behind it, right? The world is rational because it is a product of a rational mind. Or we call that God, right? So he goes on. Over the years, I've often asked my physicist colleagues why the law of physics are what they are. The answers vary from, that's not a scientific question, to, nobody knows. And the favorite reply is, there is no reason they are what they are. They just are, right? So why are they saying this? Why are they saying this? Because if you have a materialistic worldview, you have no answer for this. You have no answer for the laws of physics, right? But what does the Bible tell us? If there are orderly laws of nature, or orderly laws, there must be a law giver, right? If there's a law, there must be a law giver. And so science requires nature to be what? Goal-directed, right? So why is everything so consistent? Why doesn't gravity do what it wants to do? Why, if I take a step right now, how come I don't end up on the roof? Or if I go this way, how come I don't end up on the wall? Why? Because nature is goal-directed, right? It has an orderly law in front of it, right? In fact, this is best illustrated through fruit fly embryos, okay? So scientists have been experimenting with fruit fly embryos, and what they've been trying to do is prove evolution, okay? They've been trying to do this. And what they do is they try to insert genetic material here, genetic material there. They try to make the embryo switch from a fruit fly to a house fly to a horse fly, right? To a pig, horse, anything, right? But what they found is when they try to do this, they get one of 3 results. They get a normal fruit fly, they get a mutant fruit fly, or they get a dead fruit fly, okay? And what they found when they look at them, they find that the embryo itself makes very heroic efforts to come back to become a fruit fly. Okay? So they try their best. You know? And so, why don't they do this? Because the embryo and everything in nature has a goal-directed purpose. Who put that in there? With all of our intelligence, we can't change a fruit fly into a cat, into a housefly, into a horsefly. With all of that, we can't. Yet, atheists are telling us that non-intelligent processes can change these things and make them become other types of animals. Do you see the absurdity? We with our intelligence, we with our technology, manipulating molecules, manipulating atoms, trying to get a fruit fly to become a cow. We can't do it. How do we expect that unnatural, stupid processes like gravity, right? If I throw my phone up, what's going to happen to it? It's going to fall, right? How can we say that this law is creative? Did you notice that if you fall on the ground, does something magically appear? Like if I fall on the ground, pop, oop, a Tesla appeared. Woohoo! Yes! I got a Tesla from the law of gravity. Yes! Right? Or if I walk outside, get cold, whoo, law of thermodynamics, whoo, pop, a jacket appears on my body. Ah, thank you, law of thermodynamics. I needed that jacket. Does that happen? No. The world is goal-directed. When you guys were coming here to church, right? Did you randomly get into your car and say, I'm just going to head north? And then magically appeared here in the south? Magically appeared driving into our driveway? Magically got out of the car, magically appeared in your seat right here? No. You got up and said, okay, I'm going to go to church. And maybe some of you said, oh, honey, which church are we going to go to? Oh, yeah, let's go to South Center. Okay. Got everything, you dressed up, your clothes didn't magically appear on your body. Okay, you got in the car and you came here, right? Unintelligible laws, being creative is nonsense. And I like what Dr. John Lennox, I was listening to one of his lectures in Oxford, and he said this. He said, nonsense remains nonsense, even if a high-powered scientist says it. Okay? Remember that. Think about it. Don't look at somebody's degrees. Look at what they're saying. Is it nonsense? Or does it make sense? Right? All right. And we'll skip this because we're running out of time. But, oh well, I think this is a good thing here. So, does science need God, right? So, for example, you have a thought. You guys are thinking right now. Hopefully you're thinking about what I'm talking about here, but some of you might be thinking about other things. All right? So you're having a thought. All right? So when you have a thought, neurons in your brain fire in a certain pattern in the prefrontal cortex. Okay? Right here. All right? And then what happens is when that occurs, right, you begin to have a thought. But how do the neurons do this? Well, they have to have atoms in the neurons. These atoms, in order for the neurons to act consistently and reliably, these atoms have to do their job, right? They have to link up. They have to do these. You have to make molecules. The molecules have to produce neurotransmitters, and then you're able to think. But then, how do atoms do that? Well, the atoms, there's 4 natural forces that make atoms work. Number 1, strong nuclear force. Number 2, weak nuclear force. Number 3, gravity. Number 4, electromagnetism. Okay? So the question is this, all right? So are any of these 3, the neurons, atoms, natural forces, are they conscious? No, right? They just happen, right? So what causes these forces to do what they do? Science says, They just do. You saw that, Paul Davies, right? But Socrates actually said the unmoved mover, actually. And Paul, he took that and he said it's an external intellect, God, right? In fact, in Colossians, this is what Paul said. Christ is before all things, and in him all things hold together, right? This is what Paul said. Paul said, in other words, it is the force of God holding the power of nature, the four powers of nature, right? Which causes the atom to behave reliably and consistently, which causes our neurons to behave reliably and consistently, so that you and I can have a thought, right? Whatever that may be, right? In fact, one guy, Professor Fred Hoyle, who is an astronomer, atheist, he said this: a common sense interpretation of facts suggests that a super intellect, notice he's an atheist, has monkeyed with physics as well as chemistry, biology, and that there is no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. That's the closest thing you'll hear an atheist say, there must be a God. There must be a God. All right? All right. So God is what makes science possible. Atheists say, we don't need God. We have natural laws. But where did the natural laws come from? They steal from God, right? God sustains us. It's kind of like this. When you're playing when you have musicians playing a musical instrument, right? You hear the music, right? As long as the musicians are playing those instruments, they sustain that music, right? But when they stop, what happens? The music stops, right? That's what Paul is saying. God does what? He sustains. He is playing the music. The reason why you and I exist today is because God is sustaining us through his power. So what does science say about God? Nothing. Can science disprove God? No. Does science need God? Yes. I'm going to close with this last point. If you take, so this is the White House, in front of the White House. We're sitting about 200 feet above the air. You can see cars, right? You can see people, all right? If you zoom out by a power of 2, you notice that the White House is a part of a big city, all right? Washington, D.C. Here, you can't see cars. You can only see the buildings, right? You zoom out again by the power of 2. And you notice that Washington, D.C. is a part of the District of Columbia. You see surrounding states. You see Maryland and Virginia down south, right? As you zoom out, you find out that Washington is part of a continent, which is the northeast region of the United States, right? You zoom out again, you find out that this continent is a part of the world, okay? Now this world, when you look at this, you're like, boy, I feel pretty insignificant. Let's go on further. So, you zoom out of the Earth, and you find out that the Earth is this tiny little dot, 1, 2, 3, third planet from the sun. Look at the sun. How big is the sun? Okay, it's massive, right? That this Earth is tiny compared to Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. But notice this, our sun, as huge as it is not the biggest. For example, one star in our galaxy is Sirius, which is about 2.5 times bigger than our star. That is not really that big compared to Arcturus. You see Arcturus over here? Which is not that big compared to Aldebaran, which is not that big compared to Antares. Look at where Aldebaran is. Whereas compared to that with Betelgeuse, Betelgeuse is absolutely massive, okay? You compare from Betelgeuse to Mu Cephei, to VV Cephei A, to VY Canis Major. These are absolutely massive, massive, massive stars or suns, right? And these are all within our universe. This is just our galaxy. This is a picture I took on Mount Rainier. This is the Milky Way galaxy. Okay? It's beautiful, right? And I want to hit you with this thought. Okay? For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. This universe is so big. And God says, my love for you is as high as the heavens. You want to know how high the heavens is? All right, I'm going to show you one more evidence here. The Hubble Space Telescope, did this. So they took 1/26 millionth of the sky. Okay, so you have the observable sky. They took 1/26 millionth of the sky, and they pointed the Hubble telescope in that section of the sky. It's completely black. Okay, so scientists thought, this is not going to happen. It's not. In fact, the scientists who wanted to do this, his fellow scientists were saying, you're not going to find anything there. It's pitch black. Don't worry, but don't even do it. You're wasting the resources. But because the scientist had a what do you call it, tenure, and he was very had a lot of say, they let him do it. So for 11 days, they pointed the Hubble telescope bright open, just doing a long-term exposure, like I did. I did a 30-second exposure to get the Milky Way galaxy on Mount Rainier, but they did an 11-day exposure on a little tiny part of the sky. Now, how big is that little tiny part of the sky? Well, go out and get a grain of rice, stick it on your finger, hold it out like this, and look up at the sky, and that is 1/26 millionth of the sky. Okay, so they did this, and what did they discover? So here is what they discovered, and this is a series of pictures, and I think it'll work. Hold on. Let me see here. Here we go. This is that section of the sky, all right? So here are the constellations, and they're zooming in on the 1/26 millionth part of the sky. And it's going to come into view here soon. There it is. It's the square right there. And what they found in this little square, there are 10,000 galaxies. 10,000 galaxies. Okay? How many stars do you think are in a galaxy? What does the psalmist say? He counts the number of stars. He gives names to all of them. How powerful is God? He gives names to each one. Notice this. Psalms chapter 19, verse 1. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Do you know how many stars are in our galaxy alone, the Milky Way? There are about 200 billion stars. Do you know how many galaxies are out there? In the ones that we can see without doing a deep space photography, the one that we can just see. There is an estimated 2 trillion galaxies. And they all move mathematically as we expect, in precise movement. Mathematics describes each one of these. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament show us his handiwork. Now, the previous verse I just read, and I want you to think about this deeply, is this. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. This same being that not only created and sustains this universe, this same being is the same being whose love is infinite to the point where he would sacrifice himself. He would send Jesus. Jesus would come to this little tiny planet Are we anything compared to this universe? You and I are nothing. You and I, we might as well be an atom on the side of a cushion on the chair. We are nothing. Yet, God loves us how? With an infinite love. With a love so much that he said, I am going to sacrifice myself so that I can separate you from your sin. As far as the east is from the west. How far is the east from the west? If you go out to the galaxy, how far is the east to the west? It's infinite. He wants to infinitely separate you and I from our sins. How much does God love us? Last statement. I thought I was done. Last statement. Robert Jastrow. He wrote a book, God and the Astronomers, page 116. He said this: for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, he's an agnostic, by the way, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak, and as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries, no doubt reading Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God, a spaceless, a timeless, an immaterial, powerful, personal, intelligent, loving creator, created the heavens and the earth. Amen. How many of you want to follow Jesus? This is the reason. He is the reason why everything exists. He is the reason why everything is created. He is the reason why there is love, there's intellect. He is the reason. And he loves you more than any word, anything can describe. And he wants to separate you and I from our sins to save us.